And here you'll see a copy of our original no-edit file, and we're going to use this worksheet for additional date functions in Excel. Excel will actually save dates as a serial number, and these serial numbers are created from a system that uses January 1st, 1900 as day 1. If we were to change these serial numbers into a date, we would see that it corresponds to a certain date. In this case, dates in 2007. If we were to change these dates to a number, we would see the serial numbers associated with them. So we're going to insert a few columns here in order to use some of these additional date and time functions in Excel. So I'm going to type in a few column headers to make sure that we know what we're dealing with in each one of these columns. You should follow along with me. So now we're in column E2, and what we're going to do is use the dividend date in order to find a date that's a specific number of months away from our date. So anytime we want to begin a formula or a function in Excel, we have to use the equal sign. And we'll see that it gives the serial number of the date that is indicated number of months before or after a start date. And in this case, I want to use the dividend date, so I want to use cell D2. And I want to go 3 months away from that. And we'll notice that this EDATE returns a value that's exactly 3 months away. If I were to fill down, you'll see those values that correspond with those additional dates. EOMONTH is going to be an additional function that's going to allow us to calculate the end of month date from a specified number of months away. And so we need to look at our start date. Again, we're going to use cell D2. We want it to be 3 months away, the end of the month 3 months from now. And what you'll notice is that it is the end of the month that corresponds with 3 months after the original date. Right? So we see that June 1st is 3 months away from March 1st, and our EOMONTH date is at the end of the month of June. That's 3 months away. If we were to fill down, you'll also notice that it takes into account leap years. And what we have here is the end of the month for each of these months that are 3 months away from our dividend month. Excel also allows us to calculate which portion of a year occurs between two particular dates. So in this example, we're going to come up with the fraction of a year that's displayed between two dates. And so I'm going to use this function YEARFRAC. And the start date in this case is going to be our date in column C. And our end date is going to be the date in column D. And we'll get a date here. Right? And the reason that we get a date here, again, is because Excel converts each date into a serial number based on using a value of 1 for January 1st, 1900. This value is less than 1, so it reports it as January 0, 1900, which doesn't make any sense. So we're going to update the format for that particular cell. And so at least we have it in a format of a number. In this case, though, maybe we want to convert this to a percentage, and there's a shortcut to do that as well. We can tap the Alt button, H, and then P in order to get a percentage. If we want to change the number of decimal points, we can. Alt, H, and then a 0. And so we'll see that between January 14th of 2007 and March 1st of 2007, that accounts for about 13.06% of the year. If we fill down, we'll see additional values here. And we'll notice that when we were using this YEARFRAC function, that there is an additional component that's optional that we left off. We have a start date, an end date, and then what's called a basis. And the basis for Excel is going to be used to determine whether or not we're working with a year that assumes that there are 30 days in a month and a total of 360 days a year, or that we're going to assume we use the actual number of days in a month and the actual number of days in a year. In this case, that 360 standard may be used by the National Association of Securities Dealers and might be useful in converting information for a bond or other money market securities. And so if we want to change this to an actual year, what we'll see is that it updates the percentage. So if I go back into the cell and I want to edit it, our start date is still going to be cell C2. Our end date is still going to be cell D2. And in this case, we're going to use actual. And we'll see that that calculates a slightly different number from before. So you have to choose the application that makes the most sense for the situation you're using it. Excel also allows us to calculate the number of working days in a year, where we would define a working day, at least in the United States, as a day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And it has a function called net workdays, which is going to give us the number of net working days between two dates. And again, I'm going to use the difference between cell C2 and D2. And we'll see that there are 34 working days in that particular time period. Excel also knows that in some cases there may be holidays in those working days. And so there's an optional component to that function where we still have the same start date of C2, and we still want to use the end date of D2, and we can select some holidays here. And we're going to use an additional worksheet that has holiday information typed in it. And so if we go down to this additional worksheet called holidays, here I have a list of holidays from 2015. This list of holidays was taken from timeanddate.com, and you notice, for example, that January 1st is New Year's Day, and you'll see additional holidays listed here. And so one thing I can do in Excel is use a named range in order to use these particular dates. So I'm going to select that range of cells. I'm going to hit Alt, M to go to Formulas, M to go to Define Name, and then D to define a name. And I'm going to call that Holidays. And so here we notice that it's going to be within this workbook. We have a name called Holidays, and it's going to refer to those cells. The advantage to using it in a separate worksheet is that if you needed to update this information, so for example, maybe you had additional holidays that your company observed, you could insert those days at a later time. So I'm going to select OK here, and I'm going to go back to our date and time worksheet, and I'm going to type that formula in again. And I'm going to include our list of holidays. So rather than typing in the range, I can simply type in that name range. And in this case, we'll see that the number of working days, including holidays for this first entry, didn't change. And the reason it didn't change is because we were looking at holidays in 2015, not in 2007. And if I were to fill down, we'll see what happens. And you'll notice that for the second line, for cell J3, that there's a difference between the number of working days and the number of working days with holidays. It didn't change in this cell because we were looking at 2007, and all of our dates and holidays were listed as 2015. But if we look at the difference between these two dates, you'll notice that we were calculating the difference between April 23rd and May 25th of 2015. If we were to look at a holiday schedule, we'll see that May 25th of 2015 is Memorial Day, and so that wouldn't be considered a working day, assuming it's a holiday. And so that's why we see the difference between working days of 23 and working days of 22 for including holidays for this particular line. Now we can look at an additional feature in Excel, and I'm going to group these cells to make it a little bit easier. and we're going to determine the number of workdays after a particular date. And so before, you'll remember that we had a function called NEWWORKDAYS, and in this case, we're going to use a function called WORKDAY, and it's going to give us the number or date before or after a specified number of workdays. And so if I were to use the dividend date again, and I want it to go 3 workdays after that day, we'll need to format this as a date. And we'll see that 3 workdays after March 1st, 2007 is March 6th, 2007. If we fill this down, and we were to change this function to maybe a different number of workdays, maybe we want to choose 7. We'll notice that for May 25th of 2015, 7 working days is June 3rd, 2015. And we can use our calendar from before to see if that's true. We're going to count the number of working days from May 25th. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like it should be June 3rd. And that's what we have filled in this cell.